Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Mayfair, which is Season 2, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have the opening with, I think it was the opening with Gifford. Yeah, because I think then we cut to Rowan afterwards. I kept looking at her being like, why does she look so familiar? It kept bugging me, but luckily I recognized her name immediately when it popped up in the credits. It was like Dora Birch. I was like, oh! I was like, that's why she looks so familiar. AMC-wise, she was, if you watched The Walking Dead, I'm actually blanking on their names now. Was it The Whisperers? Her character's name was Gamma. Aaron's daughter Gracie, that's her biological aunt. But if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on this, she also played the little girl in the first Hocus Pocus movie, like the youngest one. So I was like, oh, so that's kind of funny, like the witch connection there. I was like, oh, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that's who she is. So I was like, yeah, it's just funny how that works out like that. So I wonder if that was kind of like a little wink and nod in that regard. But either way, she was reading the tarot cards, and one of the tarot cards was the title of the episode, was like the 10 Swords. And it seems like she was like, right, don't come here. I won't go to you. Maybe we need some time apart. And it's just, I guess they were going through a rough patch, but she knew something was like coming, or maybe whatever it was, she didn't want to deal with it, which is so interesting considering like Lasher just kind of walks up to her and she kind of embraces it. But a part of me also thinks like, well, that's probably part of like the element of just being a Mayfair. I mean, like, the Mayfairs have their ties to Lasher, what he means to them, and so it's like, just as much as he's like seduced by them, they kind of get swept up in the mania of it as well. Because like, she was just kind of like, oh, I don't normally just kind of like strange men coming to me, and they start doing their thing. And I was like, it's unclear whether or not they actually had sex or not, because like, he still had clothes on. So I was like, did you just like make out? I mean, it's like, you're only a few days old. Once again, when you really start thinking about it, you're like, oh, it's weird, but then you remember who he is at the same time. But it's like, oh, it's like, I guess you're technically a virgin all over again, I guess. But then I was like, well, what does that mean? Did him and Lucy have sex? But then we see with Gifford, like, it doesn't matter. Even if they were just making, because at first I was like, Jesus, she's bleeding. I was like, do you have a poisoned dick or something? Like, when you like have sex with someone, do you immediately kill them? I guess like everything that he is, his constitution is too much for a normal human to deal with. Like, I think it's a little different when you're like maybe possessing a body or something like that. When it's your body now, all that you are constituting in this body, the essence of all that you are, is just too much for any normal human to handle, even a Mayfair witch maybe. Or maybe like Rowan's the only one who could without any problem. I don't know what's causing that. Because he says it later on, he's like, he thought the Mayfair witches were stronger. And it's like, because he's drawn to them, but he can't really find anyone that's, I guess, that could survive this. And maybe Rowan can, and it's just a situation of, but they're like they're not super compatible right now, because Rowan is torn between like, it's not even love, it's a responsibility of, you're kind of my child, but I know what you are, and I'm trying to fix you and make you better and try to keep you under control, but you're kind of a rabid animal that kind of needs to be put down, should be put down, because you're too dangerous to be able to lose, because look what you've done. Like, you're outside of someone's purview for the smallest amount of time. You've murdered 2 women already. I mean, Rowan already had to cover up the Lucy thing, and it's like, no one will know what happened to Lucy, because she hasn't told anyone about that. I don't even think she told JoJo about that. At least I don't think she did. It's the cat's kind of out of the bag later on in the episode, because I think it was Gifford's husband ended up finding her. I guess like came to check on her and probably couldn't get in contact with her or whatever. Or just like maybe after the last conversation, it's like, no, I'm gonna go up there and check up on you. Or maybe just someone else in general found her, but Rowan is just hanging on by a thread because she thought she could, and maybe that's the hubris of it all, believing that with these newfound powers and stuff like that, and the fact is Lasher took, you are important to Lasher, you thought you'd be able to rein him in, but it's like, no, it's not. And now any death kind of falls on you for kind of playing your own part. I mean, to be fair, all the Mayfair witches are kind of at fault here. It doesn't just fall on Rowan. It falls on a lot of Mayfair witches because they all wanted this to happen. They wanted Lasher. And now there's the kind of the consequences of everyone kind of getting what they want, because like no one knows the true depths of what this all is, what this all means, what Lasher wants at the end of the day. Like, we know what everyone wants from Lasher, what he's supposed to represent for the Mayfairs, but what does he want from them? What is his ultimate goal? No one knows. So he's a rabid animal, and you have no idea what this is all about. It's interesting too, because I thought it was an interesting little detail, like when Rowan went downstairs initially to find him, when she thought Lasher was still in the basement, she tried to use her powers to turn on the lights, but it was flickering. Well, I was like, did he take his powers when he left? But it seems like she still has them, but I guess it's like when their connection is like tenuous as it is, I guess like it stretches the bounds of like, I guess she has to really, really push herself. I think him being around is kind of like a never-ending battery of energy you can kind of siphon off, but like, so he keeps you perpetually being able to control it, but you can do it without him. It just seems like it takes more out of you. Just like last episode, she kind of had, when she was at the hospital, she kind of had to go to sleep immediately after saving that kid. And we saw it this episode when she made that storm, it seemed like it took its toll. And that was something I was bringing up too. It was like, magic, there's always going to be consequences for stuff. So it's like, she probably doesn't know in the long run, like the consequences of her doing what she's doing. So either it's taking a toll on her body in general, just kind of like what Lasher's doing to these Mayfair women, basically making them hemorrhage. Maybe there's kind of a similar thing that's kind of happening to Rowan right now, in a similar manner of like what he's doing to them, the power's kind of doing the same thing to her. Maybe, I don't know. She gets JoJo's help because she's talking to JoJo about like, I could get your dad out, but JoJo's but for JoJo, that's a big no-no, because it's like, yeah, my dad can't be trusted. He's a manipulative prick. He's going to pretend like he knows the answers, and he's just going to string you along. So she's fine with him staying in the position that he's in. I mean, even JoJo being like, oh, you should have killed him. And it's like, Rowan's like, I can't, because he's still necessary. He's the only person that knows the truth about Lasher. So as long as he continues to be useful, we need him alive, because we can't take the chance we murk him and then like all the information, especially because all those journals and diaries are missing pages, which later on he claims he knows nothing about. But it's like, when you're dealing with a habitual liar who's done a lot of terrible stuff, like how can you trust anything that he says? Which even he acknowledges, like, yeah, I'm I don't expect you to kind of believe me or forgive me. But we'll talk about Cortland in it a little bit later on. But either way, Rowan got it in her head that, like, right, the best way to deal with Lasher... Well, she initially was able to track down Lasher, but... And I love that whole thing of him asking her to close her eyes. I was like, why would you do... Oh, right, you've changed since the last time she saw you, and now you look more like the Lasher she knows. And she's like, come on, we could go back, and I can help you. But he's like, no, like, you don't love me. But she's like, yeah, but I can kind of love you in a different way. And he's like, no, you're just trying to control me. And they kind of tussle, and she uses her powers to try and slow him down. And wasn't it one of her aunts later on being like, you could have killed him if you wanted to? She's like, I did try. I mean, as we see later on, his hand is injured. She hurt him, but she could have easily killed him, but she didn't. I think, she's conflicted, because there's this really interesting conversation Rowan has with Lark later on about like all the stuff she didn't know about herself, and now it's like, I'm becoming this person, and she's trying to figure out who that is. It's coming to terms with the person you are now, and you're kind of okay with who you are, but it's just trying to figure that out. Like, this is who I'm supposed to be, kind of, and it's like all that comes with it. So I think there's a little bit of that, but also I think her aunt was also right, where it's like, yeah, but you also, it's like, you say what you're doing is for the family, but really what you're doing is for your own sake. it's because it's like, regardless of it, like if you kill him, you have to say bye-bye to all those nifty gifts he gives you. And it's like, even now, those new gift, every new gift he gives you goosebumps. And it's like, I think Rowan's trying, like, once again, she didn't really fully ask for this. And that's why I also kind of feel like it's not all, yes, she made her choices, but also at the same time, a lot of stuff was like foisted upon her. So it's kind of like, is that really on her? Once again, it's like, are the rest of the Mayfairs not going to take responsibility for like Lasher, considering like so many people wanted this to happen, believed this to be happen? You know, how much is fate, how much is destiny, and how much of it is choice, you know? And she tried to make a storm, and it lasted for a little bit, but then Lark showed up. Now it's like, she's happy for him to be here, which I'd be like, considering everything going on, considering Lasher, to be fair, he's not your biggest fan right now, but I'd be like, some guy in your life, Lasher would probably murk him, because it's like, oh, like in his mind, it's like a misguided attempt at love and courtship of like your mind. I mean, maybe that's like, maybe the more he remembers about himself, the more likely he'd do that. But I'm like, I feel like they're like, the moment Lark showed up, I was like, dude, I'm seeing red flags. I'm seeing death flags all over you, homie. You're going to die like either partway through this season or by the end. It just feels like it, especially because they're kind of setting up like the him and Rowan of it all. Because there's like, it's kind of like a weird love square, not even love triangle. Because you're like, well, Cyprian's still in love with her. Who knows where her feelings lie with Cyprian when it comes to all this. But like, Lark likes her, she likes him. But like, there's also the Lasher of it. He's kind of the X factor where he has his feelings for you, but he knows they're not like, it's not a two-way street, it's a one-way street. But that could still always change, and just once again, how far Rowan's willing to go for the purposes of trying to rein him in. And it's like, even later on, when the bodies pile up a little bit more, she has no choice but to say like, all right, she's gonna deal with Lasher. And it's like, well, are you gonna deal with him or what? And it's like, is that easy? Is that possible? I mean, once again, he's not as powerful as he was, because all that's in Rowan now. But still, like, it comes down to the sway and control he has with the Mayfair witches. I don't know if, like, I mean, for one, there'd be a lot of people not willing to let you do that if they found out, because he's too important. So it does kind of suck about Moira's mom. The moment, like, he showed up to her, I was like, well, that sucks. I was like, you're sure as shit dead. But the moment he was like, oh, I'm tired, I was like, okay, good. You're not going to kill her. But lo and behold, he still ended up killing her. Like I said, I don't know if it's like a, hey, let's make out thing. Because she even admitted, like, she had a crush on him. But it's like, oh, you kind of chose Rowan's mom over me. So, but I loved our chats. You would tell us stuff that the adults felt like we weren't grown up enough to know. And so she kind of always had this crush on him. But I thought, like, okay, if he's sleeping, if he's resting, maybe the less like physical contact with him, nothing's going to happen. But maybe it could just be being in his sheer presence is enough. But once again, we didn't get the full context of everything. So they could have done some making out, because he's drawn, and I maybe in that moment he was trying to fight his urges, knowing like, well, the two previous Mayfairs I did that with ended up dead, so let's not repeat for a third. But he does. And that situation is sad too, because Moira wanted some kind of relationship with her mom. It's like, just turn off the radio and we can talk. But she's like, she's like, that's your problem. You think like everyone wants you to be able to get inside their head. And for her, it's like, I mean, that comes with its own complications, I'm sure, for Moira, because it's like, that's the only way people will ever be honest, because people can never be honest, and you can't even be honest. It's like, oh, let's go to this place because it was your favorite when you were a kid. It's like, no, that was Tessa's favorite. Like, you and I never had a relationship, and I guess that is what it is, Mom. And now we find out that they'll never be able to make peace, because regardless of everything, it's like, you still loved your mom, complications and all that aside, but now it's a thing of, Lasher is now responsible for taking another person away from you. So I don't know. Because I think it's interesting, because Moira never gave us a real answer when Cyprian asked her, like, what are you going to do? She's like, well, I'll read his mind and find out what happened to Tessa. What's interesting too, because like, considering he doesn't have many of his memories, he's slowly getting them back. Like, he had that conversation with Gifford at the beginning about like, oh, I remember swimming, and he remembers his home and being from far, far away. It's slowly coming back. And even some of the conversation he had with Moira's mom, but I don't believe, even with her powers, she'd be able to dig deep enough to find what she's looking for. Because it feels like there's meant to be this interesting parallel with, well, I was about to say, because there's that conversation Cyprian had where it's just kind of like, right, I can't read memories that aren't there. Once they're gone, they're gone. But to be fair, Lasher's remembering stuff, so it's not like the memories are gone. They're buried deep in his subconscious, so Moira might be able to access them if she pushes hard enough and deep enough. She probably would be able to. I mean, I'm sure like Cyprian would be able to as well, but I think for Moira, it's more important that I do it. So I thought it was neat too that Cyprian tried to like go like a different route with trying to get Moira's trust. And even the woman warned him, like, you do that, that's only a trigger you can pull once. Because once you do that and it, you know, that trust is broken, it can never be gotten again. So he goes about it, you know, the more honorable way and just kind of drops the barrier and lets her read his mind and they kind of talk. She, you know, it's like in, you know, the whole conversation about Rowan too, where it's like, oh, I want to help you Mayfair witches. But she's like, no, you want to help Rowan. But it's like, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. It's like, despite everything that she's done to you, all that she's done, and it's like, you're still in love with her. Why? He's like, oh, I wouldn't call it love. She's like, oh, okay, sure. If you want to go down that route. I guess for him, it makes it a little easier if he kind of be like, no, it's not love. But it's like, but I'm sure for him, it's like, is it? I guess he's never really come to terms with it himself on how he really feels about Rowan. I mean, once again, that they were kind of thrown quite the interesting curveball all in all. So, but yeah, now that Moira knows that it was Lasher, and also Cyprian's also seeing that Lasher's back to being looking like Lasher. He's not a baby anymore, and that's going to be an interesting conversation where it's like, oh yeah, that baby's rapidly growing. I mean, the only people who knew that, because like Dolly Jean is the only one that was stopping by the house to see Rowan and Lasher, so she knew. But I don't know how many of the other Mayfairs who knew that Lasher was back. I mean, once again, even Guilford did not. Right, she was like, "Oh, you look familiar." So a lot of the Mayfairs have no idea who he is and that he's back. I mean, at least in Lucy's case, it's like, well, I mean, you're young, and also he didn't look like himself. So, but like he looked more like himself when he was with Gifford. So, I wonder how much of this that he's going to report back to the Talamasca, because he brought up like, right, I'd rather have Home Dude who wipes memories as a colleague than an enemy. So he's kind of a means to an end. So I just trying to do the right thing in all of this, trying to help Rowan, because I believe he doesn't believe she's a lost cause. He believes that she could be saved, because it's like she's so deep in this situation that it's kind of spiraling out of control. But once again, she believes that she could rein it in, and it's like, well, it's kind of that control element to so much in life Rowan's trying to control, because so much of her life was outside of her control. And it's kind of repeating that again, even with these circumstances of finding out who you are, finding this lost family, as Lark put it, and you're still kind of in a situation of so much is still outside of your control. No matter how tightly you try to grip onto it, even with these powers, and it's like the complications of it. It's like, will you continue? Like, are you fully seduced by the powers? Is that what this is? Or is it just a means to an end where you're like, I believe with these powers, I can do good by being essentially Lasher's warden. I need to keep him on a leash. I need to keep him confined. She was hoping once again to raise him better, but who he is still comes through. And now, despite looking the way he does, he's still a hapless child, a rabid, but still a hapless child out in the world, not knowing what to do. So, where to go? So, with everything going on, Rowan had nowhere to turn to but Cortland, which we saw more inside of, being kind of haunted and being punished for his mistakes. Don't fully know what that world is that he's in. Is that some kind of mental palace that someone else created to punish him, or was that kind of part of the spell that was kind of used to trap him when Rowan did what she did, just to kind of torment him, because he's in there with his father, which that's a complicated relationship. Dad, played by Ted Levine, or is it Ted Levine? I'm gonna go with Levine. Um, the role he was playing in this a little bit, I was like, oh, funny enough, he's up here eating this meat, and then eventually Cortland cuts off his arm and feeds it to him. I was like, oh, it's a little. I was like, right, little Buffalo Billish, which I think is interesting. Which I think is so funny considering like I knew him from Monk before because I never saw the Silence of the Lambs until like probably a couple years. Yeah, probably a couple years ago is like the first time it had to be like 2021 was like the first time. I think I'd seen bits and pieces of it, and I know like some pop cultural stuff of Hello Clarice, stuff like that. But in general, like I don't think I'd ever seen that movie all the way through. I'd seen bits and pieces, I knew references, but I finally saw it for the first time fully like in 2021, something like that. So yeah, so that's what I was, once again, it's just like I said, this character feels a little Buffalo Billish just because of the whole Cortland relationship and how he was just like, oh yeah, like kind of had a little bit of that put the lotion in the basket type of feel, but which and I love that he's eating all this food and he's like, oh, you're just gonna sit there and watch me starve, because he's like, Cortland, you're a failure. The fact is you had one job and you find it fulfilled it. Like outside of that, you kind of have no purpose. This is all you can do is stay here and serve me. The fact is that you have to leave it up to other people who are better equipped and more adept at handling this situation, because this is outside of your wheelhouse. And so he has to serve his dad, cutting off his arm, which is brutal, and also him just cutting into it, just like, you're just like, Jesus Christ. He's just like he himself, speaking of hapless child, when I was referencing last year, he's looking like a hapless child in front of his father, shining his shoes until Rowan brought him out. And he was like, no, you're going to stay here with me forever. He was like, sorry, Dad, I got business to take care of. So Rowan's just kind of like, once he comes to, he's like, oh, Rowan, I didn't mean to. She's like, shut up. I don't want to hear a damn thing out your mouth except, why did Lasher want a human body? And she's like, wow, you really don't know anything, huh? You were useless to me. Like, the fact of the matter is, you were the one person that could have had some answers, and even you don't know. So it's like, what's the point of you then? So it's like, you still have influence in this family. So she's like, what you're going to do is, you're going to get a gathering. I don't care what you want to call it. You're going to gather everyone here. And he's like, because basically he was like, oh, a party or whatever. He's like, are you really? She's like, if you were me, would you trust you? He was like, fair enough. She's like, cool, you work for me now. He's like, yay me. And it's like, wow, you're cutting. So that's interesting. JoJo's not going to be too happy about that, but it's kind of like, it is what it is. But once again, it kind of plays into that nature of, you try to put Lasher on a leash, that didn't work. You're going to try and put Cortland on a leash. He's been transformed by his experience. We'll see how long that sticks. The man's a natural born bullshitter, so he's definitely going to play it up and pretend like, oh, no, you're in control, and waiting for his opportunity. But maybe he really finally did have a come to Jesus moment, confronting, everything with his dad and everything, and his, having to confront all that and face all that he's done, and even not fully understanding and knowing why he did what he did. But I thought was interesting, though, is like the last shot of the episode is his dad calling out to Rowan, be like, Rowan. So I'm like, okay, so that isn't just some figment of his imagination. That was somewhere. I don't know if that was like some kind of, like I said, mind palace. Like, is that someone looking like Cortland's dad just to fuck with him, or was that actually him in some kind of almost ancestral plane of existence? I don't know what to fully make of that. I don't know if that was him, properly him, or is that just someone pretending to be him or disguises him. It could be an entity that just takes on forms where it's like, oh, I'm looking like his dad now, but when I want to, I can look like something, we'll have to wait to see. I'm so interested to see where the hell all of this ends up taking us, especially when everyone's gathered. I guess Rowan's got to make everyone perfectly clear. Yeah, Lasher's out there, and if he gets near you, any Mayfair women, be wary, because he can and will kill you. Once again, she'll probably mention Gifford and Mora's and Tessa's mom, but probably will not reference Lucy. We'll see. And how will everyone feel with Cortland's return? Well, it's going to be interesting. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.